Okay, I'm going to try to review Invincible Season 1 without any spoilers. If you've seen it, you know how hard that's going to be, but this channel is going to be kept spoiler-free, so I need to do everything I can to not have spoilers. If you're looking for a review of Invincible Season 1 to tell you whether or not you should watch it without getting spoiled, if you have somehow not already been spoiled because this was a show that is really hard to avoid spoilers for, then you've come to the right place. I will not be spoiling in this review, but it is going to be a challenge to review this show accurately without giving away spoilers. If this is your first time seeing me, hello, I am TL Bainter. I review all sorts of stories on my channel, whether they are books or movies or TV shows. Usually it's books, but I will be reviewing some other stories here and there, such as this one, where I'm reviewing the first season of Invincible. I also include posts with writing advice and personal vlogs, so if any of that interests you, feel free to go and check that out after this video. All that said, let's get started with summarizing Invincible Season 1 with no spoilers. Gonna do my best. Invincible is a grim, realistic take on the superhero genre. We've seen some similar takes to it before, including Amazon's other superhero series, The Boys. In fact, when I first saw the trailers for Invincible, I thought, this seems a little too much like The Boys, and I wasn't sure what it was going to bring other than the fact that it's animated. And I was very surprised to find that it really doesn't have a lot in common with The Boys other than being gritty and realistic. It's a very different take on the gritty, realistic superhero shows and movies that we've been seeing. Invincible is also really bold in its approach as well. It is filled with tropes, to the point that at first I kind of thought, okay, I'm not gonna like this at all. Especially in that first episode, I thought, there is way too much that it has in common with all of these other superhero shows. I mean, it has its own version of not only the Justice League, but of the Teen Titans as well. And it didn't even try to shy away from them. It just fully embraced these comparisons, not just to these teams, but also to just superhero tropes in general. And it kind of put me off the show at first, but then very quickly in that first episode, specifically the post-credit scene, I realized, okay, now I know what they're doing. They're leaning into these tropes so that they can turn the tropes on their head, shift it, twist it, and make it its own, and make it this really dark story. Invincible is a really great example of overused tropes being done in a unique way. They embrace these tropes, they use them to their advantage, and it turned out really well. I don't even know if I could list how many superhero tropes are in this show that it does in its own way. We have everything. The school bully for the kid who gets his superpowers. The girl that the kid has to hide his superhero powers from because she can't find out about his secret identity. So much about it is just something we've seen 1,000 times, but yet it still feels fresh and unique because of the way that Invincible tackles it. Invincible mocks, obliterates, shines light on these tropes, it turns them around, twists them, makes them all its own, and Invincible is very much a show that stands out apart from other shows in the genre and other movies in the genre. It is wholly unique, not in spite of the tropes, but because of the way that it approaches them. Season 1 starts off how you might expect it to. We follow a teenager named Mark Grayson, his mother is Debbie, and his father is the most powerful superhero in the entire world. He is just a beast out there. Not beast as in Beast from X-Men. He's awesome. He's powerful. He is the man. And we have Mark in his shadow. Mark finally gets his powers and his father begins to train him. We get an interesting father-son dynamic. We get some idea that his father just wants to bring out the best in his son. Some of those training sessions are a little bit hard to watch, and there's some dialogue in there that's a little oof. We see some montages of Mark starting to learn his powers and get better and better over time. Not quite as good as his father, but he is improving, and you get to see him learning how to land from flying instead of absolutely obliterating everything that he lands on. At first, when he lands, he just always makes a crater, and this is something that he overcomes in time. Mark joins up with the Teen Titans of this world, which is called Teen Team. I told you, they are not shying away from the comparisons. They are leaning into them. We'll follow Mark, his father, the members of Teen Team, and a few other characters as well as we progress through this story. There's actually a mystery in this story that takes place as part of an overarching plot as well, and this world's version of Hellboy is investigating it along with the government and a couple of other characters who are trying to figure out what happened and why. For a season that has so few episodes, there are so many pieces and pawns at play here, and there are a lot of dynamics and fantastic scenes. You get to see Mark grow up and become a superhero and fight crime and do all the things that he wants to do. You get a few interesting character moments with other characters in the story as well. You get some insight into Mark's father, father and his family life. There's a lot here, even though there's only a few episodes in this season. It is really hard to summarize this without any spoilers, but I feel like I just did it. It's a story about a kid who's getting used to his superpowers and is learning from his dad. I don't even want to give spoilers for the first episode of the season, so it's challenging to summarize it. All right, let's move into the review itself. I'm going to review these much the same way that I would review any other story, although certain things are going to matter more than others when it comes to this review. For example, presentation. Presentation in books doesn't really matter to me that much and doesn't even count toward the overall score, whereas here, presentation is a pretty big deal. We're talking about the animation, the voice acting, sound design, everything that we see and hear in the show is part of the presentation. How is the show presented to us? In Invincible's case, it's presented beautifully. It is fantastic. It is a joy to watch. The animation is incredible. The voice acting is fantastic. Sound design is just wonderful. Even the music choices were really interesting and worked surprisingly well for the scenes that they were put into. I was surprised to hear some of the songs that we heard. I came into this show with low expectations for the animations just because of the kind of show it is. With a superhero animated series, I kind of expect it to be jumpy with a lot of motion blur used excessively and frame skips and cutting and that sort of thing, but instead I got every grueling detail of this show. All the skull crushes, limb shreds, spine rips, everything. You hear it, you feel it, you see it. It's animated and designed from start to finish perfectly. They did a wonderful job with the appearance and sound of this show. For the music, we have things like Cage the Elephant and Run the Jewels and Vampire Weekend. Seems like there were some others in there that really stood out to me, but all of these are sprinkled in throughout the show for great effect. None of it felt super out of place. I don't think there were very many, if any, original songs. If there were, I didn't notice. I'm pretty sure all of the songs could be compiled into a playlist from the various artists, which was my favorite artist growing up. The voice acting was perfect. Every voice actor was perfect for the role that they were given. There's not a single role that I would have changed. And the voice cast for this, just go look at it on IMDb. It is incredible who all is on here. I can't even list all of the ones that I love because that would just be this entire video. We have Steven Yeun, Jillian Jacobs, J.K. Simmons, Zachary Quinto, and so many. The cast is amazing through and through. Seth Rogen makes an appearance. It's fantastic. The casting for the show is awesome. Everyone suits their roles perfectly. All in all, presentation, easily 5 stars. Animation, sound design, music, voice acting, all of it. It is all absolutely 5 stars. I want to give 6, but that's not the way that the 5-star rating system works. 5 stars. Next, we have the plot. I'm going to try to give a succinct plot review. I already summarized the plot as best I could without giving any spoilers, so here I'm just going to give a quick rundown and a review of the plot without spoiling anything. There are 2 main plots in Invincible's first season. We have Mark learning how to use his powers and become a hero, and we have the overarching mystery that is revealed at the end of the first episode of season 1. That mystery is investigated throughout it, and you try to figure out what's going on and why this has happened, and then you also follow Mark learning how to use his powers and being a kid in high school. Those are the 2 main plots that you have running through all of season 1. By the way, that mystery is set up in the post-credit scene of season 1, episode 1. There is a post-credit scene for every single episode. You cannot miss any one of them because they are all important. They're usually pretty quick and they usually appear pretty early in the credits, so it's not like you have to sit through the entirety of them as far as I remember, but there is one at the end of every episode, so make sure you don't skip it and go on to the next episode. Overall, I really liked the plot. The entire thing was tied together pretty neatly in the last 2 episodes, which were definitely my favorite episodes of the entire show. There was one thing at the end of one of them that didn't sit well with me. I felt we had a bit of a cop-out that bordered on Deus Ex Machina. It just didn't sit well with me. I've seen some people argue about why it wasn't really a cop-out, but it felt like one to me, and I'm gonna need to see how things play out in the coming seasons to decide if I felt like it was a cop-out. That's all I'm gonna say here because I don't want to spoil anything. Additionally, there were a couple of episodes that didn't contribute much of anything to season 1. They were more set up for for season 2, or there were scenes in other episodes that were just set up for season 2, which I don't have a problem with. I know you need to set things up, but when there's an entire episode that only accomplishes a little bit for the main plot of this one and is just setting up the second season, when I feel you could have spent some time developing these characters and their relationships a little bit more, I just didn't really enjoy them. I just would have liked to see less than an entire episode devoted to these things if they were just set up for the second season. It's not that these episodes didn't accomplish anything at all for the first season, it's just that what they accomplished for the first season could have been accomplished in an episode that gave us a lot more character growth than what they did. Instead, it was just too focused on setting up something for the next season, and I didn't really enjoy those episodes. One of them in particular was pretty weak, even though again it sets things up for season 2 and I'm excited to see where it goes. I just would have liked to have that episode's time devoted more to what was going to happen later in season 1. It's 2 episodes of an 8-episode season, so a quarter of this season was spent setting up things for the second one. That didn't really sit well with me, and it didn't contribute enough to the plot to really warrant their existence. I would have honestly preferred to have both of them just combined into one episode and then have another episode that was devoted to more character growth and story development for the first. Having at least a quarter of the show devoted to setting up the second season, as well as having that cop-out toward the end that didn't really sit well with me. I'm gonna have to give the plot for this 3 out of 5 stars. Don't hate on that too much. I loved the rest of the plot considerably. There's a lot of fantastic setup, there's a lot to love here, and I feel like the second season will do a better job because we now have all of this set up, so I'm looking forward to what the second season has to offer, and I expect the plot to be better the next time around. Now we have the world. Invincible's world is massive and expansive. We learn really early on in the first episode that there are aliens out there and the aliens are playing a part in this, and many of the heroes are aliens or have some relation to aliens. Many of the villains that come in are aliens. We have extra dimensional travel, and there's this big vast universe out there, and our hero is just a small part of that. So this world has plenty of playroom. There's plenty of room for this series to expand and grow and spread out to. The universe is vast, and we already get the idea that it is filled with things that our character has no clue about. We don't get a lot of superhero origins in this, maybe a couple. Most of the time you're just expected to accept the fact that these heroes have powers, and how they got them isn't really relevant for this. Some of them got them because science, some of them got them because alien, some of them you don't know how they got them at all. Very little of this world is really explored, but that's not really saying much because again, it's a vast universe. We've already set up other galaxies and dimensions and planets, and however, I felt pretty early on that I had a pretty solid understanding of Invincible's world overall, of the setting, and of the fact that they were probably going to be pulling in aliens to explain quite a few things. I understood it pretty well, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of it. I liked what I saw. Once I see more of this world, I'll be able to assign a more accurate star rating, but for now, I'm actually going to give it 4 out of 5 stars. I loved what I saw, even if I don't have a lot of information about what I've seen thus far. So what I have seen, what I have experienced, 4 out of 5 stars. Now, you know that I like to review the world and the world building separately. The world is just what I think of the world and the setting and this place and the science of it and all that, and I liked it, but the world building is how it's presented to me and how I'm brought to understand more about this world. And this is where I'm going to be most critical of Invincible. The world building was next to non-existent, and I know that's probably not the point of the show, and so I tried to just suspend my disbelief and enjoy it, and I was able to do that, but there are times when I feel my experience would have been amplified if I had a better understanding and grasp on the world and on its rules. I need to know the strengths and the weaknesses in order to understand stakes during combat. I need to know what someone's limits are and what their abilities are in order to really dig into it and get excited and feel tension during combat. Otherwise, I'm not going to feel like the stakes really matter all that much. I'm not going to feel like you could kill my main character because I don't know what it would take to kill him. In some cases, this lack of understanding was absolutely intentional, and I can understand and respect that, but in others, I feel like I didn't gain anything by not understanding, and it just made my experience a little less enjoyable. I don't understand how the science works when how the science works is actually really important. I don't understand how the powers work when how the powers work is really important. There's so much that I don't understand or know that I would really like to. I would imagine the comics kind of explain away some of this, and I've thought about going back and reading them because I enjoyed the show so much, but when I'm watching the show, I shouldn't have to refer to the comics to get an understanding of how some of these people's powers work. A little bit of explanation and consistency would really help me here. Someone talking to him. Mark's dad would have been a great example of someone who could talk to him about what his limitations are. I would have loved to see one of the training scenes kind of take some time and explore what Mark's limitations are and what it would take to bring him down. So overall, and I'm pretty sorry about this, but I'm going to go ahead and give the world building 2 stars. There was enough world building for me to get a decent enough grasp on the stakes sometimes, but I just wasn't always sure why certain things worked and certain things didn't. It would have just been nice to understand the scale of powers and what the stakes were, and I didn't really get that from this show. Some of these limitations and abilities are explained a little bit in the last couple of episodes, but even then, there just wasn't enough for me to be clear on what the stakes were when that was really important. So let's stop talking about something that I didn't enjoy and talk about something that I did, which is going to be the characters. I love all the characters in this series, even the ones that were meant to hate. Yes, I did hate them when I was meant to, but they were really well written and I loved that. This story is very much character driven and it is done extremely well. All of these characters are ones that you can easily get attached to, from Mark to Omni-Man to Debbie and Cecil and even Amber, who I actually expected to just be kind of tossed away. I was nervous that she was going to end up being tossed aside as the love interest that was just there to be his love interest, to show him that he couldn't live a double life, and then she would be tossed away and that was going to be a wasted character who never got to be three-dimensional. But we do get 3 dimensions to her, and she does have her own life and her own will, and she is intelligent. She's not an idiot, and we get so many great moments of her being smart, and she's definitely her own character, and she wasn't thrown away the way that I expected her to be. That was fantastic, and Amber was just excellently written. There isn't really a character I didn't like, even among those who made brief appearances. They all were unique and characters I wanted to explore and learn more about. Yes, there were characters that were annoying and that you were meant to hate, but I also understood their motivations. They were characters that made sense. They felt alive and real, and I really appreciated that. I loved that each of these characters was somebody that you could like, even if they were obnoxious or horrible people. I'd be hard-pressed to pick a favorite, but I'm probably going to say Omni-Man was my favorite. You could tell right from the beginning, just in the way that he was animated, his facial expressions, the way that he moved in the background, that this was a character who had a lot of depth and there was something going on with him. You could understand that right from the start. He was really well animated, written, and definitely voiced. J.K. Simmons did an incredible job. Omni-Man, either Omni-Man or Mark, honestly, will be my favorite characters. If I pick a third, I would say Eve, probably. All in all, the characters of Invincible, fantastically animated, beautifully voiced, well written. I would be heartless to give them anything less than 5 stars. Next we have the writing. I feel like I've already praised the writing quite a bit through this review, but I'm gonna really hone in on it here. The writing in Invincible was remarkably well done. The way that Invincible embraces and twists tropes, like somebody grabbing someone's head and turning it all the way around, is just fantastic. It was really well done. They did a great job with it from beginning to end. I loved how tropey the first episode was. I didn't love it when I first watched it, but when that first episode ended, my view on all of the tropes that I'd seen in that first episode absolutely changed, and I understood why they'd done it. The dialogue is also really solid throughout the show. Nothing ever felt super cheesy or out of place or like something the character wouldn't say. There wasn't anything flowery either. It was all natural, and at times it was even funny. Not in the sense that this is a funny show, but just people said things that were funny. And I found myself laughing at a couple of scenes in particular. Most of these episodes, apart from the 2 that I mentioned before, were written in a way that contributed to the main story in some form or fashion. Even if it was in a minor way of setting up certain aspects of the story or developing the characters, it was always done, and it was done well. Again, except for those 2 episodes, although those did have great character moments in them, it's just that wasn't the focus of the episode, and it didn't really help move the plot forward as much as it could have. Overall, I'm gonna go ahead and give the writing here 4 out of 5 stars. Again, It's those 2 episodes that are really dragging the writing back for me and that I felt were kind of unnecessary. But overall, the writing in here is incredible. The dialogue was beautifully done. The story itself is fantastic. I'm also going to remind you of the cop-out that I mentioned before. That was an example of what I think is poor writing. But again, I could end up coming back and changing that if I find out more about it later on. But for me, the way it was presented in this season, it just kind of felt like bad writing to me. So I want to give it 5 stars, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with 4 out of 5 because there were just some things that really irked me about the way that it was written and the way that it was laid out. I know that I docked those points in the plot section, but this was also an example of bad writing. Again, 4 out of 5 stars for the writing as opposed to the 3 out of 5 for the plot, just because in the other parts, the writing was really strong. Now we come to the final segment of the review before I summarize my overall thoughts. This is where I'm going to talk about the pacing, and the pacing was okay for the most part. Once again, I have to bring up those semi-filler episodes. They just really didn't contribute to the pacing all that well. But at the beginning, we got pretty good pacing, and we got Mark's powers, we got moving on the story, and it started picking up. And the other episodes that were not part of the filler ones that contributed to season 2 were also great examples of pacing. And then those last 2 episodes, I've been watching 1 episode a night because that was what I had time for, but I stayed up late to finish those last couple because at the end of the 7th episode, I was like, okay, I have to watch the finale. I don't have a choice. I need to watch the next one. That last episode was like getting hit by a train. It was insane. They did a pretty decent job of maintaining tension throughout it. Even with those filler episodes, they did manage to thread a bit of tension through it. And again, those episodes that contributed to the 2nd season are going to dig into the star rating for this season here because they really screwed up the pacing for me, especially one of them that I don't even know I would rewatch because it was kind of boring for me. There were some cool moments to it, but overall it seemed a little boring and meaningless other than setting up what might be an issue in the 2nd season. So 4 out of 5 stars, and if the 2nd season doesn't make this mistake and does a great job of building off of what was set up for it in the 1st season, and we don't have any more of these mistakes from the first one that I've mentioned, 2nd season I think will easily get 5 stars for its pacing because it had all of the right components, it just needed to not have the filler episodes as part of it. So, my overall thoughts. Invincible was a grueling, gruesome, intense, and wonderful ride from start to finish. Even with those couple of hiccups that I mentioned, this is still a show that is totally worth sitting down and watching, and I definitely recommend it to anybody who is looking for a gritty and grueling superhero show. One caveat that I will say is watch the entirety of the 1st episode, including that final cutscene, and if the violence and the gore is too much for you at that point, you probably shouldn't keep watching. It doesn't decrease in the violence and gore as time goes on. But if you can handle that, you'll probably be fine for the rest of the series. If you're looking for a fresh take on the superhero genre, this is definitely a show that I would recommend, especially if you like something that is dark and gritty and raw. Invincible is perfect. My overall review for the 1st season of Invincible is easily going to be 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, that's my review of Invincible Season 1. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm curious as to what you think about my thoughts on this season. Do you agree with some of the opinions I shared here, especially as it comes to things like stakes and those filler episodes, or what I perceive as filler episodes? If you agree or disagree, I'd love to hear from you. If you're going to post spoilers, try to leave some spacing so that people don't scroll down to the comments and get spoiled. Again, I keep my reviews spoiler free, but I cannot necessarily guarantee the same for any comments that might appear on the blog post or in this video, so scroll at your own discretion. I'd also love to hear who your favorite character was because I have a really hard time picking one. I'm pretty sure it's Omni-Man. I don't know. I think if I got more of Alan the Alien, he would probably be my favorite. Please consider supporting me in any way that you can, whether it is a like or a subscription or a comment. All of it is going to help as I work to build my community here. You can follow me on social media as well, and those links will be down in the description. I am most active on Instagram, so I would advise checking me out there if you're interested. Thanks so much for taking the time to check out this review. Until next time, bye.
Bored of this.